Welcome to Whispers of the Night. This is a place where stories are soft, where the world slows down, and where sleep comes naturally. If you enjoy peaceful stories like this, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and gently like this video. It truly helps us continue creating calm nights for you. Tonight's story is called The Cabin Beneath the Starry Forest Canopy. As you listen, allow your body to relax, your breath to soften, and your thoughts to drift away. There is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to think about. Just listen and rest. Before the story begins, take a moment to settle in. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw loosen. Allow your hands to rest comfortably. Take a slow breath in through your nose and gently breathe out through your mouth again, breathing in and breathing out. With every breath, your body becomes heavier, more supported, more at ease. Notice the space around you. The quiet, the stillness. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing waiting for you. This moment is only for rest. If thoughts appear, let them pass like clouds in the night sky. You don't need to follow them. Your breathing becomes slow and steady, natural, comfortable. With each exhale, you sink deeper into calm. You are safe, you are supported, and you are ready to drift into the story. The Cabin Beneath the Starry Forest Canopy. The Path of Whispering Pines. Nina moved slowly along the narrow forest path, her footsteps soft against the pine needle-covered ground. The moon hung high above, its pale silver light slipping through the tall trees and settling gently on the earth below. The forest felt alive, yet calm, as if it were breathing in a steady, unhurried rhythm. Each step she took seemed to be noticed by the woods around her, not in a watchful way, but in a quiet, welcoming one. The pines stood tall and close together, their long trunks rising like pillars into the night sky. Their branches swayed gently in the breeze, needles brushing against one another with a sound so soft it felt almost like a whisper meant only for those who listened carefully. Nina slowed her pace, allowing the murmurs of the trees to surround her. The sound was comforting, steady, and patient, as if the forest had all the time in the world and was offering her permission to slow down as well. Fireflies drifted lazily through the air, their small lights glowing and fading in an unhurried pattern. They floated near the ground, then rose gently upward, like fragments of fallen stars that had found their way into the forest. Nina watched them as she walked, her gaze following their gentle movements. Each flicker of light felt like a quiet guide, leading her deeper along the path without urgency or expectation. The air was cool against her skin, carrying the clean scent of pine, earth, and distant night flowers. She breathed it in slowly, feeling it settle into her chest and soften something tight within her. Her body felt tired, not in a heavy or painful way, but in the way that comes from long days and unspoken thoughts. It was the kind of tiredness that asked for rest, not sleep just yet, but calm as she continued forward. The forest seemed to grow quieter, though never silent. Crickets sang steadily from unseen places, their rhythm blending naturally with the sigh of the wind and the whisper of leaves. Somewhere far away, something moved softly through the undergrowth, then stilled again. Nothing felt threatening. Everything felt exactly as it should be. Nina's thoughts drifted as freely as the fireflies around her. The worries she carried earlier felt distant now, softened by the steady presence of the forest. Each step she took seemed to pull her further away from the noise of the world she had left behind. Here, there were no expectations waiting for her, no voices demanding attention. There was only the path, the moonlight, and the gentle sounds. Of the night, the moonlight shifted as clouds passed slowly overhead, dimming and brightening the forest in a calm, natural rhythm. Shadows stretched and softened across the path, creating patterns that moved without intention. Nina watched them briefly, noticing how nothing stayed fixed for long, and how peaceful that felt. The forest did not cling to any single shape or moment. It allowed everything to change gently. She brushed her hand lightly against the bark of a nearby pine as she passed, feeling its cool, rough texture beneath her fingertips. The touch grounded her, anchoring her to the present moment. The tree felt solid and ancient, as though it had stood there long before she arrived and would remain long after she left. There was comfort in that thought, a quiet reassurance that the world did not depend on her constant effort to keep turning. The path curved gently ahead, disappearing briefly into deeper shadow before re-emerging in soft moonlight. Nina followed it without hesitation. She did not know exactly where it led, but she felt no need to rush or question it. The forest seemed to guide her naturally, offering just enough light to see where to place her feet, just enough sound to remind her she was not alone. As she walked, her breathing slowed to match the rhythm of her steps. Inhale, exhale, step, step. The steady pattern lulled her thoughts into a quieter state. Memories surfaced briefly, then drifted away again, like leaves floating on a slow-moving stream. Nothing demanded her attention for long. Everything felt gentle and passing. The fireflies grew more numerous as she moved deeper into the forest, their soft glow illuminating the path in scattered points of light. Nina felt as though she were walking through a living constellation. Stars gathered not above her, but all around. Their presence filled her with a quiet sense of wonder, the kind that does not overwhelm but simply rests alongside the heart. The wind shifted slightly, carrying with it the faint creak of branches. Moving high above, the sound blended seamlessly with the forest's other voices, adding depth rather than disruption. Nina tilted her head upward for a moment, catching a glimpse of the moon through a break in the canopy. It looked distant and calm, watching over the forest with quiet patience. Her shoulders relaxed as she walked, tension easing from her body little by little. The tiredness she felt earlier softened into something gentler, something closer to peace. It was as though the forest had noticed her weariness and adjusted itself to meet her where she was, offering stillness instead of demand. The path beneath her feet felt familiar, even if she had never walked it before. Pine needles muffled her steps, and the earth beneath them felt steady and sure. She trusted it instinctively, letting her weight settle comfortably with each movement. There was no fear of slipping or stumbling, only the calm assurance that the ground would support her. Crickets continued their steady song, weaving a consistent thread of sound through the night. Their rhythm reminded Nina of a heartbeat, constant and reassuring. She listened without trying to count or follow it, allowing it to simply exist in the background. A reminder that life continued gently all around her. As she moved forward, the forest seemed to open slightly, giving her a clearer view of the path ahead. The fireflies drifted onward, their lights pulsing softly, never rushing, never fading completely. Nina followed them, feeling as though she were being led not toward a destination, but toward a feeling, one of quiet curiosity and safe solitude. Her mind felt lighter now, uncluttered by the thoughts that had weighed on her earlier. The forest did not ask her to solve anything or be anything other than what she was in that moment. It allowed her to exist simply as a presence moving through moonlight and shadow. The breeze brushed gently against her hair, lifting a few strands before letting them fall again. It carried with it the faint rustle of leaves, a sound so soft it seemed designed to soothe rather than alert. Nina welcomed it, letting the cool air wash over her face and neck. Time felt different here. Minutes stretched comfortably, unmeasured and unimportant. There was no urgency pulling her forward, no reason to turn back. The forest existed entirely in the present, and by walking within it, Nina found herself doing the same. She paused briefly, not because she was tired, but because the moment felt worth lingering in. Standing still, she listened more closely, noticing layers of sound she had missed while walking: the distant chirp of an insect, the low sigh of the wind moving through deeper branches, the subtle shift of leaves settling after a breeze passed. After a moment, she continued on her steps, unhurried and sure. The path welcomed her again, unfolding quietly beneath the moonlight. Fireflies hovered near her shoulders now, their glow reflecting faintly in her eyes. She smiled softly, a small expression of appreciation for the simple beauty around her. The forest seemed to respond, its whispers growing just a little quieter, as if acknowledging her presence and then allowing her space. Nina felt held by the night, not enclosed, but gently surrounded, safe, unseen, yet not alone. As she walked deeper beneath the whispering pines, her heart settled into a calm, steady rhythm. Whatever had brought her here no longer mattered. The forest had accepted her without question, offering stillness, curiosity, and quiet companionship. And with each step forward, Nina allowed herself to receive it fully and without resistance. The hidden cabin's glow. Nina sensed the change in the forest before she saw it. The path beneath her feet remained soft with pine needles, and the trees still stood tall and ancient around her. Yet something in the air felt different. The night no longer felt wide and wandering. It felt focused, as if it were slowly guiding her attention toward a single quiet place ahead. The whispers of the pines softened as she walked, their gentle murmurs easing into a hush that felt deliberate rather than empty. Even the wind seemed to slow, brushing past the branches with a careful touch. Nina followed the narrowing path, her steps light and unhurried, guided by a growing warmth that glowed faintly between the trees. At first, the light appeared like a distant ember, barely noticeable against the cool blues and silvers of the night. Nina paused, watching it flicker gently, uncertain whether it was a trick of moonlight or something more. The fireflies nearby drifted lazily, their glow dimming slightly, as if yielding space to the warmer light ahead. As she moved forward, the glow grew steadier, richer, and unmistakably golden. It did not flash or demand attention. It waited patiently, radiating calm rather than urgency. Nina felt her shoulders ease without conscious effort, her breath slowing, as if her body recognized the promise carried within that light. Between the ancient trunks, the cabin revealed itself slowly. It was small and simple, its wooden walls shaped by time rather than ornament. The structure felt rooted in the forest, as though it had always belonged there. Moss clung softly to parts of the roof, and the wood bore gentle signs of weather and care, each mark telling a quiet story of endurance and shelter. Warm lantern light spilled through the windows, pooling onto the forest floor in soft, uneven shapes. The glow touched the bark of nearby trees, illuminating their textures and softening their shadows. Darkness remained present, but it no longer felt deep or uncertain. It rested comfortably alongside the light, content to share the space. Nina stopped again, letting herself simply observe. The cabin did not feel like a discovery to be claimed, but like an offering patiently revealed. The forest around it felt different, quieter, as though it were holding its breath in respect for the calm that surrounded the structure. Stars shimmered faintly above, visible through openings in the canopy. Their light felt distant yet attentive, watching over the small clearing without intruding. The night sky seemed to lean closer here, narrowing the distance between Earth and stars until the two felt gently connected. As Nina took another step, she noticed a faint sound weaving into the stillness. It was soft and delicate, almost easy to miss. A gentle chime swayed somewhere near the cabin, stirred by the lightest movement of air. The sound rose and fell slowly, never sharp, never sudden, each tone fading naturally into silence. The rhythm of the chime matched the calm of the forest. It did not interrupt the quiet, but became part of it, like breath or heartbeat. Nina found her breathing aligning with the sound, inhaling and exhaling without effort, her chest rising and falling in a steady, soothing pattern. The air felt warmer as she approached, carrying a subtle scent of wood and flame. It mixed with the forest's natural fragrance, creating a sense of familiarity that felt both comforting and timeless. The contrast between the cool night air and the gentle warmth wrapped around her like a soft layer of protection. Lanterns hung near the cabin's entrance, their flames steady behind glass. They did not flicker wildly or cast harsh shadows. Instead, they glowed calmly, illuminating the doorway just enough to feel welcoming. The light did not push into the forest. It respected the darkness, extending only as far as needed. Nina noticed how quiet everything had become. The crickets that had sung steadily earlier now rested in silence. Leaves barely moved. Even the fireflies seemed fewer, their glow faint and unhurried. It was as if the forest had collectively decided to pause, creating space for stillness. She stepped closer, feeling the ground shift subtly beneath her feet as pine needles gave way to packed earth. The path seemed to end naturally here, not abruptly, but as if it had always been meant to lead only this far. Beyond it waited rest, not in the form of sleep yet, but in the promise of shelter. The cabin's windows reflected the forest softly, blending the outside world with the warmth inside. Through the glass, Nina could glimpse gentle shadows and warm light, though no clear details revealed themselves. It felt intentional, as if the cabin wished to offer comfort without overwhelming her senses. A soft crackle reached her ears, barely audible but unmistakable. The sound of flame, contained and calm, echoed gently within the lanterns. It added depth to the quiet, a reminder of warmth held safely behind glass and wood. Nina stood at the edge of the clearing, allowing herself to linger. There was no urgency urging her forward. The cabin did not demand entry. It simply existed, offering its presence without expectation. The forest, too, remained patient, surrounding the space with quiet respect. Her thoughts drifted, slower now, less insistent. The weight she had carried earlier felt lighter, as though the glow had gently loosened its hold. The idea of rest no longer felt distant or abstract. It felt close, tangible, waiting just beyond the soft line of lantern light. The wind moved, again, subtle and careful, brushing past the cabin and stirring the chimes once more. Their sound floated through the air like a gentle sigh, then faded naturally into silence. Nina felt the sound settle within her, smoothing the edges of her awareness. She noticed the way shadows shifted along the cabin walls, slow and fluid. Nothing moved quickly here, nothing startled. The entire scene felt composed, as if each element had found its rightful place within the calm. The ancient trees stood tall around the cabin, their presence protective rather than imposing. Their branches arched gently overhead, framing the small structure like guardians that had watched over it for years. The forest did not crowd the cabin. It held it gently, allowing space for warmth and light to exist. Nina took another step forward, feeling the warmth brush against her skin. The lantern glow softened the coolness of the night air, creating a comforting balance. Her breath slowed further, her shoulders lowering as if releasing tension she hadn't realized she was still holding. She listened again, becoming aware of the smallest sounds, the faint creak of wood responding to temperature changes, the whisper of distant branches moving far beyond the clearing. The quiet persistence of the night holding everything together. Stars shimmered above, steady and distant. They did not compete with the lantern light. Instead, they complemented it, offering a sense of vastness beyond the shelter, while allowing the cabin to remain a place of closeness and care. Nina felt suspended between two worlds, the open forest behind her and the promise of shelter ahead. Neither pulled her forcefully. Both allowed her to choose her pace, her moment. That freedom felt deeply comforting. She paused once more, standing fully within the glow now. The forest behind her remained visible, but softer, less defined. The cabin before her felt solid and reassuring. The balance between the two created a sense of quiet wonder that filled her chest without overwhelming it. The chimes stirred faintly again, then rested. The flame crackled softly, steady and calm. The night held its silence, complete and unbroken. Everything felt aligned, as if the moment had settled into exactly the shape it was meant to take. Nina did not rush forward. She allowed the warmth, the quiet, and the soft light to surround her fully. The promise of rest did not need to be claimed yet. It was already present, carried in the glow, the stillness, and the way the forest seemed to breathe slowly around the cabin. She stood there, calm and unhurried, wrapped in quiet wonder. The ancient trees, the glowing lanterns, and the silent stars formed a gentle circle around her. In that space, nothing was required of her. The forest continued to hold its breath, and Nina allowed herself to rest within that pause. A hearth of stillness. Nina stepped fully inside the cabin and gently closed the door behind her. The soft sound of wood settling followed, a quiet final note that marked her separation from the forest outside. The night remained present, but distant now, filtered through thick walls and small windows. Inside, the air was warm and still, carrying the comforting scent of burning wood and aged timber. A small fire hummed gently in the hearth, its glow steady and unhurried. The flames did not leap or crack sharply. They moved slowly, rising and folding back into themselves, as if conserving their energy. Amber light spread across the room, touching the wooden walls, the ceiling beams, and the simple furnishings with a calm, even warmth. Shadows gathered in the corners, but did not linger uneasily. They rested where they were, content to remain part of the quiet. Nina stood for a moment, letting the warmth reach her. It seeped into her skin, easing the lingering coolness she had carried in from the forest. Her shoulders lowered slightly as she exhaled, breath leaving her more slowly than before. The cabin felt like a pause in motion, a space where nothing rushed forward and nothing followed behind. She reached for her coat and slipped it from her shoulders, moving without hurry. The fabric whispered softly as she folded it over one arm. Setting it aside, she felt lighter, as though removing more than just an outer layer. The simple act carried a sense of arrival, of choosing to stay rather than pass through. The fire responded with a gentle crackle, a sound low and steady, like a quiet conversation meant only for those nearby. Each soft pop and sigh blended naturally into the stillness, never demanding attention, yet always present. Nina found herself listening without trying, the sound settling into her awareness like a steady rhythm. She stepped closer to the hearth and held her hands out toward the warmth. The heat reached her palms slowly, spreading through her fingers and into her wrists. She turned her hands slightly, letting the warmth touch every side. The sensation grounded her, drawing her attention fully into the moment. There was nothing else she needed to do, nowhere else she needed to be. The room creaked faintly as the wood adjusted to the warmth of the fire. The sound was subtle, almost affectionate, like the cabin acknowledging her presence. It did not startle her. Instead, it added depth to the silence, a reminder that the space around her was alive in its own quiet way. Nina glanced around the room, taking in its simplicity. A small table stood near the wall, its surface worn smooth by time. Shelves held only a few carefully placed items, nothing excessive, nothing out of place. Everything felt intentional, chosen not for display, but for comfort. The cabin did not overwhelm the senses. It allowed them to rest. Near the fire sat a hand-woven chair, its shape curved and inviting. A soft blanket lay draped over one arm, its texture rough yet familiar. Nina approached it slowly, still warming her hands as she moved. The firelight followed her, stretching and shifting across the floor in gentle patterns. She lowered herself into the chair, sinking into its support with a quiet sigh. The woven surface cradled her comfortably, firm enough to hold her upright, soft enough to invite relaxation. As she settled back, the chair creaked softly, then stilled, as if satisfied. Time seemed to stretch the moment she sat down. The steady ticking of thoughts slowed, spacing themselves farther apart. Nina rested her hands on her lap for a moment, then lifted them again toward the fire, continuing the small ritual of warmth. Her breathing deepened, becoming slower and more even with each passing moment. The outside world felt distant now, not because it had disappeared, but because it no longer pressed against her awareness. The concerns and responsibilities she carried earlier felt muted, softened by the cabin's quiet presence. They existed somewhere beyond the walls, but they held no urgency here. The fire continued its gentle hum, flames shifting lazily behind the hearth's frame. Shadows danced faintly along the walls, moving without purpose or pattern. Nina watched them briefly, noticing how they rose and fell with the fire's rhythm, then allowed her gaze to soften. The windows reflected the warm interior light, blending it with the darkness outside. Through the glass, the forest was visible only in suggestion dark shapes, faint movement, distant stars. The cabin stood as a calm center between those worlds, offering enclosure without isolation. A faint sound reached her ears, barely perceptible. Wood expanding, settling, the cabin breathing alongside the fire. Each small noise felt reassuring, proof that nothing was static, yet nothing was out of control. Everything adjusted naturally, without force. Nina leaned back slightly in the chair, feeling its support along her spine. The tension she hadn't noticed before eased gradually, melting into the warmth around her. Her thoughts slowed further, becoming less defined, more like impressions than words. She closed her eyes briefly, not to sleep, but to rest in the sensation of stillness. Behind her eyelids, the fire's glow lingered as soft warmth. Her breath moved in and out, gently, steady, and calm. When she opened her eyes again, the room felt even quieter. The fire crackled softly, a low and comforting sound. The gentle creaks of wood continued at long intervals, never interrupting the calm. Nina felt as though the cabin itself was holding her in place, allowing her to remain exactly as she was. She adjusted her posture slightly, shifting her weight in the chair. The woven surface responded with a soft sound, then settled again. She let one arm rest along the chair's side, fingers relaxed. The other remained near the warmth, palm open. The simplicity of the moment felt complete. There was no need to fill it with action or thought. The cabin asked nothing of her beyond presence. The fire offered warmth without demand. The silence invited rest without expectation. Nina noticed how her thoughts now drifted slowly, appearing and fading without pulling her attention. Memories surfaced briefly, then dissolved like embers cooling into ash. Nothing lingered long enough to disturb the calm. The air inside the cabin felt balanced, neither too warm nor too cool. It wrapped around her gently, steady and comforting. She felt supported, not just by the chair, but by the space itself. Outside, the forest continued its quiet existence, but it felt far away now, like a distant memory rather than an immediate presence. The cabin formed a soft boundary between her and the night, allowing the sense of safety to deepen. Nina let her head rest back against the chair, gazed drifting toward the ceiling beams. Firelight traced their edges softly, revealing the grain of the wood. The beams felt strong and reliable, holding the space together with quiet assurance. The fire hummed on, steady and patient. Each crackle felt like a punctuation mark in the stillness, never breaking it, only shaping it gently. Nina's breathing matched that rhythm naturally, without effort. She felt no desire to move, no need to change her position. The moment felt complete as it was. Time continued to slow, stretching comfortably, losing its sharp edges. The cabin held her in deep calm, wrapped in warmth, quiet and gentle sound. The outside world remained distant and unimportant, existing beyond the walls without intrusion. Here, in the glow of the hearth, Nina rested fully, safe and still, allowing the hush of the space to carry her gently forward. Stories written in starlight. Nina stepped carefully onto the porch, the wooden boards smooth beneath her feet, warmed slightly by the residual heat of the cabin's walls. She pulled the blanket around her shoulders, tucking it securely beneath her chin, letting its warmth seep through the fabric and settle into her body. The soft weight of the cloth felt comforting, grounding her in a sense of presence she had rarely allowed herself. The cabin behind her glowed faintly from the fire within, its golden light spilling out through the windows, casting soft reflections onto the wooden boards of the porch and illuminating the space immediately around her. Beyond this gentle halo of light stretched the vast forest, dark, infinite, and calm, filled with shapes that were familiar yet mysterious, as though every tree and branch had existed for centuries in quiet patience. The night sky above stretched wide, painted in deep, infinite blues that seemed to pull the edges of the world outward. Stars shimmered between the canopy of trees, scattered like silver dust across the darkness, tiny pinpricks of light that promised stories older than memory itself. Some glimmered faintly, almost hidden behind the gentle sway of pine branches, while others burned brighter, steady, and unyielding, as if holding their own presence for those willing to watch carefully. Nina lifted her head slightly, eyes tracing the constellations as they appeared and disappeared behind shifting branches. The patterns suggested themselves softly, leaving shapes unfinished, stories half told, allowing her imagination to wander freely between each star. Each flicker was a quiet invitation, not demanding her understanding, but offering a moment of connection to something larger than herself, infinite and constant. comforting in its vastness. The night air moved across the porch with gentle intent, brushing against Nina's cheeks and hands with a cool caress. It carried the delicate scent of pine, damp earth, and the faint remnants of smoke from the cabin's hearth. She inhaled slowly, letting the night air fill her lungs, letting it wash over her shoulders, letting it settle in her chest. With each exhale, she felt tension loosening from her body, a soft unwinding of thoughts and worries she had carried with her earlier. The rhythm of her breath began to match the stillness of the night, slow and deliberate, rising and falling in harmony with the subtle rustle of leaves and the distant whisper of the wind. The forest beyond the porch seemed to settle around her, responding to her presence with quiet acknowledgement rather than intrusion. Branches swayed lightly, not aggressively, but with a grace that suggested awareness, as if the trees themselves were holding their positions in consideration of the calm moment. The shadows stretched and softened beneath the canopy, folding into one another until the darkness felt layered and textured rather than threatening. Here, the night was not empty. It was alive with subtle movement and sound, each element in its own rhythm, offering both space and company simultaneously. Somewhere far off, an owl called, its hoot deep and measured, echoing through the trees. The sound rolled gently, fading slowly into the vastness, leaving only the faintest trace behind. Nina did not flinch. She did not startle. Instead, she welcomed the sound as part of the natural orchestra surrounding her, one more voice contributing to the quiet narrative of the night. Its presence reminded her of the forest's quiet attentiveness, its awareness of life unfolding within and beyond her immediate vision. Every distant sound, the rustle of small creatures moving among the undergrowth, the subtle snap of a branch in the far distance, the gentle hum of the night wind blended seamlessly into the environment, a rhythm that both grounded her and invited contemplation. Nina shifted slightly, leaning lightly against the porch post, feeling the smooth texture of the wood beneath her fingers. Her movements were slow, intentional, an acknowledgement of the stillness around her and within her own body. She adjusted the blanket over her shoulders, again, feeling its warmth extend further down her back and across her chest. The sensation was subtle but significant, an anchor in a world that had felt unmoored earlier, a reminder that she could exist fully in a single place without needing to rush forward or retreat. Her gaze returned to the stars, now noticing the subtle changes in the sky as clouds drifted slowly past the constellations. The light shifted imperceptibly, softening the glow of some stars while letting others shine more boldly. Each change was gentle, unhurried, as if the heavens themselves had no urgency, allowing her eyes and mind to adjust at their own pace. The movement of the clouds mirrored the forest's swaying branches below, creating a natural dialogue between earth and sky, between shelter and openness. Nina felt as though she existed between these two elements, both a part of the quiet night and a witness to it, fully present yet unintrusive. The blanket shifted slightly as a breeze lifted its edges, teasing at her hair and brushing lightly against her cheek. She closed her eyes briefly to feel the sensation more fully, allowing the coolness of the air to mix with the warmth of the fabric around her. The interplay of sensations, the firmness of the wooden porch beneath her, the softness of the blanket, the gentle chill of night air, The warmth from the cabin behind her created a complete and perfect balance. Every part of her body felt observed and cared for by the environment, without expectation, without demand. When she opened her eyes, Nina noticed how the stars seemed to flicker in response to the slight movements of the forest canopy. The swaying of branches created tiny openings and blockages, letting starlight spill across the space in brief, scattered patterns. Some points of light appeared to dance, while others remained steady and constant, reminding her of the permanence of things beyond immediate perception. Her thoughts drifted in response, rising gently and then fading, carrying no weight, merely existing for a moment before dissolving back into the night. The forest itself seemed to breathe. Nina could sense the subtle rise and fall of its presence in the rhythm of the wind, the sway of branches, the faint scratching of small creatures moving along the undergrowth. Each sound and motion contributed to a profound sense of connection, a feeling that she was both part of and separate from the world simultaneously. She could observe without interference, listen without being drawn into action, rest without stillness, feeling like inactivity. A soft owl call echoed again, this time closer, followed by the rustling of leaves as the bird moved along a distant branch. Nina felt a gentle emotional release at the sound, a subtle loosening of worry and thought that had remained clutched in her chest. The night carried it away silently, accepting without judgment or interruption. Her eyes wandered from the sky to the forest floor, noticing the faint shapes of undergrowth and the subtle flicker of fireflies drifting lazily. Their glow was uneven, gentle, and soothing, like liquid light suspended in the air. They moved unpredictably, yet slowly enough that she could follow their paths, imagining each as a tiny story passing by, never needing to be caught or understood fully. Nina's gaze followed one particularly bright firefly for a long moment, observing its slow drift, feeling a kinship in the patience it carried. She took another slow, deliberate breath, feeling the expansion and contraction of her chest match the rhythm of the night. With each exhale, the burdens she had brought with her seemed lighter, their edges softened, fading into the background. She felt her heart unclench, her thoughts spread out, dissolving into the quiet wonder around her. The porch beneath her felt stable and enduring, a solid counterpoint to the moving forest and drifting sky. She ran a hand along its surface lightly, appreciating the subtle textures of the wood and the warmth it had absorbed from the cabin interior. The tactile awareness rooted her, connecting her fully to the present moment, bridging the gentle distance between self and surroundings. Time seemed to stretch infinitely. The night, the stars, the forest, the gentle soundscape of owls, wind, and fireflies, it all merged into a single, coherent sensation. Nina did not notice the passage of minutes or hours. There was only presence, only observation, only breathing in rhythm with the world around her. She allowed her thoughts to wander freely but lightly. Images appeared, stories formed and dissolved. Ideas touched the edges of her mind and floated away. She did not hold on to anything. She did not chase or resist. The stars above, the blanket around her, the wind brushing softly against her skin, they carried her attention and then released it again. The quiet was unbroken, yet rich with subtle details. The gentle sway of the canopy, the faint movement of shadows on the porch, the muted glow of the cabin windows. the distant calls of nocturnal creatures, they all combined into a symphony of calm. Nina felt herself breathing in sync with it, inhaling with one layer, exhaling with another, integrating completely into the rhythm of the night. As she leaned lightly against the porch post again, Nina felt the tension in her body dissolve entirely. The night air, the warmth of the blanket, the stillness of the forest, the gentle presence of stars above it all merged into a perfect balance. Her shoulders lowered fully, her hands relaxed, her mind softened. The weight of earlier thoughts and worries seemed distant, as if carried away by the night breeze and the natural cadence of the world around her. She stood there, wrapped in warmth and observation, aware of every sound, every movement, every faint shift of light, yet entirely at peace. The stars above continued their steady, patient glow. The forest held its quiet breath, and the cabin behind her remained a sanctuary of gentle warmth and calm. In this place, Nina allowed herself to exist fully, to reflect, to release, and to simply be held by the night, the forest, and the quiet magic of starlight. And there she remained, standing, wrapped in the blanket, the gentle rhythm of her breath, the subtle sway of branches, the quiet whisper of leaves, the distant owl calls, and the soft glimmer of the stars, weaving 1,000 silent stories above her head. With each moment, her heart lightened, her mind expanded, and her worries dissolved. Further into the night, the forest, the stars, and the porch itself seemed to cradle her in a perfect balance of wonder, reflection, and quiet release, creating a space where she could simply exist without need, fully present and completely at ease, embraced by the stories written in starlight. The forest's lullaby. Nina returned inside quietly, closing the cabin door with careful gentleness until the latch settled into place with a muted sound. The warmth of the interior wrapped around her immediately, softer now than before, as if the fire itself had grown calmer in her absence. The glow from the hearth painted slow-moving shadows along the wooden walls, and the air carried a comforting blend of pine, ash, and night-cooled wood. She moved without hurry, her steps light, as though the cabin had asked for silence, and she had instinctively agreed. The outside world felt distant already, its vastness folded neatly into the quiet rhythm of the space around her. The simple bed near the window waited patiently, its clean linens smooth and inviting. Moonlight filtered through the glass, pale and gentle, resting across the floor and the edge of the mattress in soft, silver shapes. Nina paused beside it, breathing slowly, letting the stillness sink deeper into her body. Every movement felt deliberate but unforced, guided more by comfort than intention. She eased herself down, sitting briefly at the edge of the bed before allowing her body to follow gravity's quiet suggestion. When she lay back, the mattress accepted her weight without resistance. The bed was firm enough to support her fully, yet soft enough to invite release. She adjusted slightly, turning onto her side so she could face the window. The glass felt like a boundary that softened rather than separated, allowing the forest to remain present while keeping her safe within the cabin's shelter. She drew a blanket over herself, the fabric warm and familiar, settling naturally along her shoulders and arms. Outside, the forest continued its gentle song. Branches swayed in a slow, unhurried rhythm, their movement guided by the night breeze rather than any forceful wind. Leaves brushed softly against one another, producing a sound that was neither sharp nor loud, but constant and reassuring. The noise rose and fell like breath, steady and predictable, offering a cadence that invited rest. Each rustle blended seamlessly into the next, forming a continuous hush that filled the spaces between her thoughts. Nina listened without trying to focus. The sounds came to her naturally, layering themselves into her awareness without demanding attention. Somewhere deeper in the forest, something shifted perhaps, a small animal moving through undergrowth, but the sound was muted and fleeting, never breaking the calm. The cabin creaked softly in response to temperature changes, the wood settling and adjusting as it always had. These sounds felt intimate and familiar, like a quiet conversation the space was having with itself. Her breathing slowed gradually, matching the rhythm outside. Inhale, gentle and full. Exhale, long and unburdened. With each breath out, her body released something small and unnecessary. The tension in her shoulders eased first, followed by her neck, then her hands. Her fingers loosened their natural curl, resting openly against the blanket. Her jaw softened. The muscles behind her eyes relaxed, allowing her eyelids to grow heavier without effort. Moonlight traced a faint line across the bed, shifting slowly. As branches moved outside the window, the light never fully settled, never demanded attention. It drifted like water across wood and fabric, present but unobtrusive. Nina watched it briefly, then let her gaze blur, allowing the image to soften into something abstract and soothing. The distinction between shapes mattered less now. Everything blended gently together. The forest's lullaby continued without pause. Leaves sighed as they brushed against bark. Pine needles whispered secrets to the wind. Far above, the canopy shifted in slow agreement, responding to the same rhythm that guided her breathing. The sounds carried no urgency. Nothing needed to happen next. Nothing required her participation. The night had taken over, offering rest without condition. Nina felt the steady rise and fall of her chest become more pronounced, deeper with each cycle. Her thoughts, once loosely drifting, began to slow as well. Ideas formed more slowly now, dissolving before they could fully shape themselves. She did not resist the quieting of her mind. She welcomed it, to grow wider and more peaceful. The bed creaked faintly as she adjusted her position, tucking the blanket closer around her shoulders. The sound faded quickly, absorbed by the cabin's walls and the forest beyond. The window glass reflected a faint outline of her face, softened by shadow and light, but she did not focus on it. Her awareness remained inward, centered on sensation rather than sight. Outside, the breeze shifted slightly, altering the pattern of sound. The change was subtle, but it carried a new layer of calm. The leaves responded immediately, their size adjusting to the new direction, their rhythm unchanged in its gentleness. It felt as though the forest was breathing alongside her, matching her pace without effort. Nina's limbs grew heavy, not with exhaustion, but with comfort. The weight felt welcome, grounding her to the bed, reminding her that she was supported fully. The mattress held her evenly, no pressure points demanding attention. Her body sank just enough to feel secure, not trapped. The sensation allowed her to surrender more deeply, trusting the stillness around her. A distant sound drifted through the trees, so faint it barely registered, perhaps the far-off call of a night bird, perhaps just the wind shaping itself through branches. It blended seamlessly into the lullaby, indistinguishable from the rest. Nina did not try to identify it. Knowing was unnecessary. Listening was enough. Her breathing continued to slow, becoming almost imperceptible in its quiet regularity. Each inhale felt cooler than the last, refreshed by the night air filtering subtly through the cabin. Each exhale carried warmth, dispersing gently into the space around her. The exchange felt balanced, effortless, complete. The warmth of the fire lingered in the cabin, no longer crackling loudly, but humming softly from embers. The sound was low and steady, barely noticeable, yet deeply comforting. It felt like a heartbeat within the walls, slow and dependable. Nina felt its presence more than she heard it, a background assurance that everything was as it should be. Her eyelids fluttered briefly, then rested fully closed. Darkness settled behind them, not empty, but rich and calming. The sounds of the forest filtered through even here, woven into the quiet of her thoughts. She felt suspended between wakefulness and sleep, aware but unburdened, present but drifting. Time lost its shape. Moments stretched gently, unmeasured and uncounted. The forest did not rush. The night did not hurry her. Sleep approached not as an end, but as a continuation of the calm she was already experiencing. Her mind loosened its final grip on awareness, letting images fade naturally. Branches continued their slow sway. Leaves continued their soft sighing. The forest sang without pause, its lullaby, unwavering and kind. Each sound guided her further, inward, deeper into rest. Her breathing followed faithfully, steady and calm, no longer consciously guided. Nina felt herself sinking further into the bed, as though the space beneath her had deepened. The sensation was subtle, comforting, like being held rather than falling. The blanket rose and fell gently with her breath, a quiet companion to the rhythm of her body. Thoughts appeared only as fragments now, half-formed and fleeting. They dissolved almost immediately, leaving behind a sense of openness and ease. Nothing lingered long enough to disturb her. The forest seemed to absorb everything excess, carrying it away on the breeze. The window beside her reflected faint movement as branches shifted again. Moonlight dimmed and brightened in soft cycles, never sharp, never intrusive. Even the light seemed to lull, guiding rather than stimulating. Nina remained still, her body fully at rest, her awareness drifting further inward. The cabin creaked once more, softly, as wood adjusted to the cooling night. The sound felt protective, like a quiet acknowledgement of her presence. It settled quickly, leaving the hush intact. Nothing followed it. Silence reclaimed its gentle dominance. Her breathing deepened one final time, then softened again, settling into a slow, natural rhythm. The forest's song wrapped around her completely now, each sound layered carefully, each pause meaningful. The lullaby carried no melody, no pattern she needed to follow. It simply existed, steady and endless. Nina's consciousness slipped further away from thought, closer to pure sensation. The weight of the blanket, the firmness of the bed, the hush of leaves, the steady breath within her chest doll, of it blended into one continuous experience. There was no separation between her and the night. She belonged fully to the moment. Sleep arrived quietly, without announcement. It did not pull or push. It simply settled, like the forest settling into deeper stillness. Nina drifted gently into it, guided by the rhythm of the night, her breath steady, her body relaxed, her mind completely at ease. The forest continued to sing softly outside the window. Branches swayed, leaves sighed. The night held its calm, and within the cabin, beneath the watchful quiet of the stars and trees, Nina rested fully, surrendered to sleep, cradled by the forest's endless lullaby. Sleep beneath the canopy of stars. The cabin rested in a hush so deep it felt as though the night itself had leaned closer, listening. The fire had settled into glowing embers, their light dim and slow, pulsing faintly against the wooden walls. Shadows no longer danced but remained still, stretched gently across the room like resting creatures. Nina lay unmoving on the bed near the window, her body fully relaxed, her breathing soft and even. The boundary between wakefulness and sleep had thinned, becoming almost transparent, and the cabin seemed to respond to this change, its presence growing quieter, lighter, as if preparing to fade alongside her thoughts. Outside, the forest held its calm with reverence. The branches that had swayed earlier now moved only slightly, guided by a breeze so soft it barely disturbed the leaves. The sounds of the night grew fewer, then softer, then nearly indistinguishable from silence. Each noise that remained felt, distant and muted, wrapped in a gentle quiet that carried no tension. The forest no longer spoke in clear notes or rhythms. Instead, it breathed in long, unbroken intervals, offering stillness rather than sound. Moonlight spilled through the window, pale and luminous, settling across Nina's face and the blanket drawn up to her shoulders. The light felt closer than before, as if the sky had lowered itself gently, closing the distance between earth and stars. The edges of the room softened under its glow, losing sharpness, losing definition. The cabin began to feel less like a physical place and more like a memory forming, something warm and protective that existed somewhere between dream and reality. Nina's breathing deepened subtly, then evened out again, finding a rhythm that no longer required awareness. Each breath came and went without effort, her body knowing exactly what to do. Her chest rose slowly, then fell, the movement barely noticeable. The tension that had once lingered in her limbs was gone entirely. Her hands rested open and loose, her shoulders heavy with comfort, her jaw relaxed. There was no remaining resistance within her, no last thought holding her to the surface of wakefulness. The forest beyond the window seemed to sense this surrender. The stars above shimmered more softly now, their light diffused through thin veils of cloud and drifting branches. They no longer appeared distant or unreachable. Instead, they felt present, watchful, as though they had drawn nearer to offer quiet companionship. Their glow was steady and kind, neither bright nor dim, existing in perfect balance with the night. The cabin itself seemed to respond to the closeness of sleep. Its wooden walls creaked faintly one last time, then settled into complete stillness. The air inside felt lighter, thinner, as if it had been filtered of all weight. The warmth from the embers lingered just enough to keep the space comfortable, but even that warmth seemed to soften, blending seamlessly into the cool calm of the night. Nina drifted deeper, her awareness loosening its final hold on the present moment. Thoughts no longer formed as images or words. Instead, they appeared as gentle impressions, fleeting sensations that dissolved almost immediately. There was no distinction between inner and outer worlds now. The forest, the stars, the cabin, and her own breathing blended into a single, uncontinuous experience. The window reflected faint traces of starlight, and beyond it, the canopy stretched, wide and protective. Leaves barely moved, branches remained still. The night had reached its quietest point, the space where nothing more needed to happen. Even time itself seemed to pause, stretching into a long, uninterrupted moment of rest. Nina's mind slipped fully into sleep, not abruptly, but gradually, as though guided by invisible hands. The transition was smooth, unmarked by sudden darkness or falling sensations. Instead, it felt like sinking gently into warm water, supported at every moment. The cabin around her faded further, its edges dissolving into soft shapes and glowing impressions. The physical world receded, leaving behind only warmth, light, and the quiet presence of the night. In her dreams, there was no narrative, no urgency, only sensation remained. The feeling of being held, of belonging, of existing without effort. The forest surrounded her even here, its calm extending beyond the boundaries of waking life. The stars above seemed closer still, their light diffused and comforting, forming a gentle canopy that watched without expectation. Sound faded completely. The faint whispers of leaves, the distant calls, the subtle creaks of woodall dissolved into silence. This silence was not empty. It was full and soft, layered with peace. It wrapped itself around Nina's sleep like a final blanket, sealing her safely within rest. The night deepened further, though no marker announced the shift. Darkness became richer, more complete, yet never heavy. The stars continued their steady glow, unchanging and patient. They did not flicker or fade. They simply were, constant and reassuring, offering their quiet presence without demand. Nina remained still, her sleep profound and undisturbed. Her breathing was now barely perceptible, smooth and regular, flowing in perfect harmony with the night. The forest held her rest carefully, as if aware of its importance. Every element remained in balance, nothing moving too quickly, nothing pressing forward. The cabin existed now only as a suggestion, a memory of warmth and shelter rather than a defined structure. Its walls and ceiling blended into the darkness, their shapes softened by moonlight and dream. The bed beneath her felt both present and distant, a point of comfort anchoring her to rest without drawing her back toward wakefulness. Above, the stars seemed to watch quietly, their light falling gently through the canopy, through the window, through the thinning layers of perception. They did not intrude upon her sleep. They simply remained steady and kind, witnesses to her peace. Time passed without measure. Minutes and hours lost their meaning. The night stretched on, deep and calm, unbroken by sound or movement. The forest continued its silent vigil, holding the space around the cabin with care. Nina's sleep deepened further, settling into its most restful state. There were no dreams to pull her upward, no thoughts to stir her mind. Only stillness remained. Her body rested completely, restored by the quiet rhythm of the night. Every breath nourished her, every moment of stillness adding to the sense of calm that surrounded her. The stars overhead remained unchanged, their light unwavering. The canopy stood firm and protective, its presence felt even in silence. The forest, the cabin, and the night formed a single, unified space, and within it, Nina rested fully, untouched by worry or thought. The silence deepened once more, reaching a level so complete it felt sacred. Nothing stirred, nothing shifted. The world held its breath, not in anticipation, but in contentment. Everything was exactly as it needed to be. Nina slept on, held gently by the forest and the quiet night. The stars watched over her without judgment or expectation. The cabin glowed faintly in the darkness of memory and dream. And within this perfect stillness, wrapped in silence and calm, she remained fully at rest beneath the canopy of stars. Thank you for listening. May your rest be deep and gentle. Let the forest hold your dreams. Let the night remain quiet and kind. There is nothing more to do. Good night.